Hi, I'm Mana Moini, and you're listening to the Humanity Podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Humanity Podcast. I'm your host, Mana Moini. Today's guest is a keynote speaker, a vocalist, an award-nominated podcast host, and a legendary ringside announcer. I want to welcome Lilian Garcia to the show. Hi, Lilian.
Thank you. Hi. Oh my gosh, it's so great to be here.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. And for everyone out there, Lilian and I used to be neighbors out in California. And I don't know if I ever told you this at the time, Lilian, but you were always so deep and just in tune with working on yourself. And I think, this was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And I was like not even in the beginning of my journey. But I just want you to know before we get started that the things that you shared, or, you would give little pieces of advice. It's like those meant a lot in the time because I didn't even have some of the tools to like do that. And I even now sometimes think back to, especially as we've reconnected for this podcast, some of the things that you had said or shared or whatever, and it still resonates. So thank you for that.
That makes me feel so good, actually, because that is where my heart is. I mean, I just love helping people. I think it's been in me since I was born. And so to hear that and to know that I've made some difference, I know what it means when people do that for me. So thank you. And I'm glad that I could help in any way.
You're welcome. Thank you. I wanted to start off with you just telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into the whole motivational, working on yourself, helping people empower themselves to be better.
Yeah, my life has been quite the journey. I mean, it started for me. I wasn't born in Madrid, Spain. I was born on a military base, but I got there like when I was 1 year old, and my dad was in the army, and so being that he worked for the U.S. Embassy and growing up in Madrid till I was 8, even though I was an American, I also felt very Spanish, right? So I learned English when I was 5. Like I went to the American school there. And so that's why I don't have an accent, but I can speak fluent Spanish as well. When I came to the US when I was 8, and like, again, even though I was American, it felt very foreign to me. So immediately I had to learn how to adapt. And I got bullied right off the bat. And the girls were not nice. I mean, I was wearing dresses to school because that's what you wore in Spain. So immediately I got picked on for that. And then they knew that I had come from Spain. So it was almost like I was looked at as the outsider. And so it was rough. It was rough. And I had to learn how to take care of myself during that bullying time. Right. And then being at home, things started getting rocky with my parents. My mom went into deep depression when we moved from Spain. She did not want to go. And so it was almost like things were not safe at home and things were not safe at school. So it did require me to figure out, how do I take care of me when I don't have the sources that usually do take care of you? So that's led me, right? But when you're asking about my journey, I mean, eventually I end up, from South Carolina, I went to New York, and in New York, I got the audition for the WWE. That's another whole thing that we can get into if you want. And then that led me to working with a lot of the women there at WWE. And it's almost like, because I was there for so long, it was a full-time 15-year span, but it was in the span of 17 years because I took 2 years off in between. So I ended up becoming the veteran. And in that, it was like I was mother hen. And so I could help a lot of the girls that were in the locker room. And I loved doing it. They loved coming to me. And that spun into doing Chasing Glory, which was a podcast. And it was all about uncovering the things in our chase for glory and our struggles. And so it's always really been in me. And so now as a motivational speaker, I mean, I love going out there and empowering people with my story and what I've learned. And and talking about having that arena level confidence, because that's what we kind of need right now in this world.
Right. And you mentioned the WWE. So you are the first woman, you are the first woman to ever announce WrestleMania.
Yeah.
That experience is so unique. It's probably a once in a lifetime kind of thing. What did you, I'm sure a lot of things, but what was kind of the main thing that you learned about yourself doing that whole stint?
Wow. I learned that I could handle more than I thought I could. And I learned that from day one, because day one, when I showed up there, my audition was like doing mock-up backstage interviews, which I ended up doing on SmackDown. But my first day was on Monday Night Raw, and Raw was always live. And so I show up and I'm thinking that I'm just going to get a tour of the place and then they're going to fill me in on what I'm going to do. Like, no one has said anything leading up to this point. All I did was sign contracts. That was it. So I go and then I'm meeting people. I'm getting the tour of the arena, because every Monday was in a different location, right? It was around the world, really. It was a lot around the US, but we started traveling all over too. So I'm getting a tour of the arena. I'm in Iowa for that specific Monday. And I went to the meeting, and then at 3:30 that afternoon, they're like, oh yeah, you know what? You're going to be our brand new ring announcer beginning tonight. And
Wow.
live in front of 14 million people and 20,000 that are in the arena. And I'm like, okay, but how do you do this job? So I realized, looking back, the first thing that I realized what happened was that I didn't say, oh no, I can't do this job. I've never done this job. What are you talking about? What? I literally said, okay, and how do you do this job? Was the word how, right? Immediately going into all right, give me some help. Let's go. And so I ended up being thrown in. And let me tell you, I almost ran. I'm not going to lie. Like 20 minutes before going live that night, I'm looking at the exit sign, and everything in me was saying, abort, abort the mission, because you don't know what you're doing. And then they tell me 20 minutes before going live that you can't even use cue cards. So to go in that scenario and not being able to use cue cards and going live to a job that you've never been trained for, but then turning that into 15-year career, it did teach me that I could handle more than I thought. And I think that's for everyone. Because what I ended up doing that night to get through it is I took from my past experiences, and I'm like, okay, what did I do when I got thrown into the radio station? What did I do when I got thrown into the swim team without knowing how to swim? Like, I started thinking, what were my sink or swim situations? And what experience did I learn from that? And now let's forward it to this experience. And that's what I did. And certain things like chunking things out, I focused on one match at a time. And that's how I got through it.
I love that. You mentioned bullying, which I
Yes.
know has been a big part of what kind of shaped you into who you are. In today's society, bullying is, I would say, probably out of control with social media, and just everything that's so accessible out there. What is your advice to someone out there that is being bullied? What would you tell them? Because I know a lot of people out there, especially young people, face some sort of bullying.
Yeah. It's not easy. And I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. I think if there was a clear-cut answer, we wouldn't have bullying. We would know exactly what to tell somebody, and boom, they could do it, right? So I think scenarios are different, but I think my biggest advice to anybody who's being bullied, for me personally, I wanted to be liked. I came from an environment in Spain where there were no cliques. There were no popular girls, right? So when I got here to the US, and there's like, oh, there's this group that's the popular girls, and the mean girls, or this or that. I was like, wait, there's groups? And they're like, yeah, those are the popular ones. And I'm like, well, I want that. Right. So immediately, because I wanted that, I tried to force myself into a group. That was the biggest mistake. And I got to the point where I ended up, you're gonna die at this. So I ended up bringing the girls one by one into the room with the guidance counselor. And let me tell you, she tried to warn me. When I told her I wanted to do this, when I said, I want you to bring the girls in one by one, sit with me, and I want to discuss, why don't they like me? And she's like, I don't think that's a good idea. And I'm like, no, I think it's a good idea. I want to know because maybe I can fix something, right? Because I was like, is there something wrong with me? Right? Because then I'll just fix it. Well, one by one. And of course, the girls are like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. We absolutely love Lilian. Oh, and then we'd get out of there. And then they're like looking at me with nobody around, right? And like, oh, how dare you do that? Now you'll see, we'll really get you. So it made things worse. So I would say, don't try to force anything, right? This is not about you being liked or unliked. I realized that anybody in my position, any girl that was wearing dresses to school that came from a different place would have been picked on. And so seeing that, I was like, oh, this had nothing, I can't take this personal. It had nothing to do with me. Plus, not everyone's going to like you. And that was a big lesson for me. You know, even in WWE, like being in front of all these fans, there's going to be some fans that are not going to like you. Not everyone's going to watch this podcast, right? Not everyone's going to, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And that's okay. We get choices in life. So I think it's like, just be okay with being you. I think if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have been so consumed to be with the popular girls. I wouldn't have put them on a pedestal and try to chase that pedestal. And I would just been with my tribe, you know, find people that do connect with me and then just focus on them.
And you said something, very interesting. Not everybody's going to like you, which is the truth. And I think we realize that as we get older, probably as we become more in tune with who we are, because I actually, when thinking about this conversation, was going to ask you, and you kind of touched on this, but it's like, why do we want people who don't like us to like us? Like,
Well,
what's driving that?
Yeah, I think humanity, look, I think it's natural that we want to be liked. It's the approval. We're seeking approval. We're seeking, please, world, accept me. And the thing is that we're seeking approval, unfortunately, from other people that are broken, right? So, and whatever is going on in their life. And that's why I've learned a lot, especially when I went back into church and I found a non-denominational church. My friend took me there, and it was at the end of 2021 when I was very, very broken. And I started really seeking God again and getting really connected. I realized, wait, I just need his approval. I don't need anybody else's approval. Boy, did that set me free. I'm not seeking that validation anymore, even from my job. I don't seek any kind of validation. I'm just doing what he wants me to do, right? The purpose is whatever I'm feeling like, okay, he wants me to empower these people, this or this. Once I do my job, look, that's the same thing with this podcast, Mana. Once we are finished here, I'm going to pour into this, but I'm not going to be looking at the reviews of what people think of this podcast. That's not up to me. That's taking away from this moment, right? It's about what can I pour? What can I share with you? Whoever needs to hear it will take the nuggets and apply it into their life. And then that's it. That's done. Like, no, you shouldn't be seeking approval as a host. And I don't need to be seeking approval as a guest.
Right. Love that. When I first started the podcast, I reached out to you on Instagram, just letting you know, because you did have such a successful podcast for 4 years, Chasing Glory. And you said to me a couple of things, just tidbits and tricks that you shared with me. But the two that really stood out were stay authentic and have fun.
Yes.
You focus a lot about authenticity in the work that you do. Talk a little bit about the importance of that and how you recommend people stay authentic, or what are the steps we take to stay authentic to ourselves, especially in the times where that's tested a little bit.
Well, especially in social media, right? Because everyone's trying to project something. And that was the thing. I remember hating social media. I got to a point was like, oh, I don't even know what to post. I don't want to post. Blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, oh, that's because I'm trying to keep up with everyone else. I'm trying to see what's Sarah doing? What is, Lisa doing? Guess what? Sarah's got her journey. Lisa's got her journey. What is Lilian's journey? what do I want to put out there? What makes me happy? What makes me have fun in this life, right? And when I started looking from that lens, I'm like, I'm just going to be me. I'm going to be me. And I came up with that phrase, remember to always be yourself. At first, it was remember to always be yourself and trust that it's enough. And then I changed it just because I felt like, wait, I don't want people to misunderstand that and thinking that it's not important to keep working on yourself, because it is important. There's, like an onion, there's layers that we unravel. So I've changed it to remember to always be yourself, but with the passion to want to keep growing. And so in that passion of keep growing and the layers coming off, that's when you're really starting to find your true self. That is when you start really getting authentic. And when you start getting authentic and uncovering all those layers, and you're like, wow, there's somebody really cool there. It's almost like you can see yourself in the third person, right? And you're like, I kind of like that, and I like that, and I like that, and I'm going to let that out, and I'm going to let that out, and I'm going to let that shine, and I'm going to let that shine. Oh man, and when I'm telling you, once you start doing that and you're just being real and you're just being you, you will have such a release that you don't have to compare yourself to anyone else. The weight of the pressure of it will be off your shoulders. That's when you can start having fun. That's when you can start glowing and people see your glow. People have seen my glow. Ever since I started doing that, they're like, wow, you really are. You're just so fun to be around. But because I'm not trying to be somebody else. I'm not. That's hard. That's a whole mask and a costume that gets very heavy. So I would say in the steps to do that is to start really self-help, right? Self-growth, all of that is very, very important. Start getting to a place where you can unravel all those layers. Get rid of your trauma, work with someone that you can start getting rid of that trauma, and then really uncover who you authentically are, and then go shine.
I love that. And, I'm in the beginning of this journey of being more public with the podcast, and it doesn't feel natural sometimes to get on social media or authentic. And to your point, I've had to kind of like figure out what works for me. And I'm still figuring that out, because getting on 10 times a day and sharing everything that just to me right at the moment doesn't feel authentic. So you're right. You really have to figure out what works for you. And it's so hard to pretend to be someone else. It's just like it's a full-time job being yourself. So.
Yeah. And nobody can be better at yourself than you. There's nobody that's like you. We all have individual fingerprints. Isn't that exciting? And there's a reason we all have, because we all have an individual journey. We all have individual, just spontaneity and this and that comes out of us. But yeah, I don't want to be anyone else. I truly don't. The more I get to know myself and the more I get to unravel that, that onion, I am so excited to keep finding new things about myself. And I'm also very authentic. I like being open. I think a part of being authentic is also not being scared to share your struggles. There is power in that. There's power in being vulnerable, because the more vulnerable you are, the more you give permission to someone else to be vulnerable as well. And when you have that, you go, oh, wait, you're going through that? I'm going through this. Oh my gosh. And now you don't feel alone. That's how we can help, especially in this environment, and especially in social media, when you're just getting like the highlights of somebody. Man, that's why I have no problem now. Even last weekend, I was at a mastermind. I was not in a good place. So I woke up Friday morning. And I'm going to be posting about this, but I woke up Friday morning and it was just really, really heavy. And some days you're going to have that, right? I was crying it all out. And I was like, I'm not going to go to this mastermind because I'm a shell of myself. I'm not my usual spunky self. And then at 9:06 in the morning, I went, you know what? Go get dressed. Go show up. Go show up. That's all I keep hearing God, like, go show up. So I showed up. And when I walked through those doors, the people that came to me and were pouring love and how you doing and the hugs, it was like gasoline. It started fueling me back up. And that's what self-care, when we're talking about self-care, you're gonna need those moments of you showing up, even as vulnerable as you are, even as tarnished as you are, if you're a shell of yourself, it doesn't matter, show up anyway. Allow other people to pour into you, right? And then that fuels you, then you can, in turn, pour into someone else. But had I not been vulnerable and said, when they came to me and they're like, how are you? And I went, not good. I almost didn't even come this morning. I was actually sobbing. They're like, oh my God. And they're just like hugging me. I'm telling you, just those hugs fueled me. And that's the power of vulnerability.
I love that. And I love that you touched on having the right support around you.
Yeah.
I know a lot of times in our lives when we start on a new journey or we begin to evolve, some of the people closest to us don't really know how to handle that change or that evolvement. Have you ever had to deal with that where the people that you were the closest to you maybe didn't understand kind of the evolvement, and you know, how did that make you feel? Sometimes it's really lonely, right? Because the people you expect to show up for you don't. So I'm just want to know if there's any sort of experience you've had with that that you can share, and what your suggestions are for people that might be dealing with that.
I'm the only reason I'm laughing at that is because I'll never forget. I went to, my friend told me about this seminar, and I had never really done like really deep self-development seminars, right? Or masterminds, they call them now. So I told her, I was like, okay, this looks really cool. It's 3 days. And I said, I'm going to do this. I've got nothing to lose. Right. And she did it. So she was already like, Lil, I'm telling you, this is great. And I trust her. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I sign up. And when we get in there, it's just in this classroom. And when we get in there, they said, look, we really would like for you guys for 3 days to turn off your phones. We want your full attention. We want you to really dive into this, not get distracted with the world, right? That can take you out of this. Like, that's the way you're going to actually get the most out of this course. It's up to you, right? If you want to do it, you want to go in your phones, whatever. But I'm telling you, that's the way you're going to get the most out of your course. I was ready to dive in. So I'm like, I'm going to do it their way. I'm going to put my phone away for 3 days. And I dove in. Wow. I mean, it was amazing. I can't even tell you. It was like the beginning of everything, like my world going, whoa. Okay. But I turn on my phone Sunday after the evening, my phone is blowing up with my family members. I'm like, oh, something happened. Oh my gosh, something happened. So I'm calling in, I'm thinking, what have I missed? Who's, in the hospital or whatever? Nope. It was, and I'm not going to say specifically who so that I don't embarrass them, because they had the best interest at heart and all, but they had heard that I'd gone to the seminar, and they all of a sudden thought that I had joined a cult. So I'm laughing because I'm like, don't you know me better? I am not joined a cult, right? I'm just doing self-development on myself, right? And so no matter how many times I was like, this is not a cult. They're like, oh, well, we looked things up on the internet and the internet said this and the internet said that. And I was like, okay, I just did it. I promise you it's not a cult. And then I realized later, there are a lot of people that are not ready and willing to accept their load, I would say, of what they put out in the world and their side of the negativity, right? Because when you do self-help, you have to own your side of the lane too, of where you didn't show up, right? And where the things that you've done and the choices you've made, not everybody's ready for that. So when they've held, because a lot of these seminars, they will put a mirror up to you, right? Like, not literally, but in the exercises, it's like you're looking at your choices, you're looking at it and you're like, oh wow, well, not everyone's ready for that. So what do? They, instead of taking responsibility, they bash the company. And that's what they were doing. They were going on the internet bashing the company. How dare they do this, that. So my family member thought that I had joined a cult based on that. And no matter how much I tried to explain to them, that was not it. It didn't matter. And then I had to be like, you know what? It's okay. It's not for them to understand. It's not for them to understand. I want you to take that, and anybody listening to take that as the biggest lesson here. Everyone has an individual journey. If everything in you is driving you to improve yourself, to go into self-development, to do these things and you're not hurting anybody, right? Because I always say these are good as long as you're not hurting anybody. And you have that mindset of growth. It doesn't matter if anybody around you, especially family members, because a lot of times we can't really like get rid of them. But it's not, don't try to convince them. You're going to exhaust yourself. Don't try to convince them. Just keep going on your journey. But then surround yourself with really good friends so that they can counter your balance, your family members that are maybe not understanding. But you know what? Here's the other thing too, before we go on to the next question. I think the other thing too, Anna, is the more your family sees you changing for the better, then they're like, oh, wait, there's something really cool. And sure enough, that family member came to me and they're like, I'm seeing you in a different, I'm seeing how you're handling this so much better and you're doing this so much better. So they started seeing a good growth in me. And that will be that's the thing that will make people notice more than anything.
So taking what you just said a step further,
Yeah.
there is some quotes out there kind of along the lines of, if you want to know who your real friends are, look at who joins you in celebrating your wins.
Oh, for sure.
Speak to that.
Yeah. Do you know the story about the crabs in the bucket?
No.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Okay. So it's a story about this little boy who was on a fishing dock, and I think it was in Greece or something. It doesn't, I don't think the location really matters, but he was on there with his father. And they were walking towards a boat, and there was a fisherman and a bucket. And the bucket had tons and tons of crabs in it. And the little boy would see that there was crab crawling up the side, and all these other crabs were crawling up, right? And there was no lid on the bucket. So the little boy goes up to the fisherman and is like, "Hey, look, your crabs are going to get out. They're going to get out. You need to put a lid on it." And the fisherman just smiled at the little boy and he's like, "Keep watching." So the little boy's like looking at this bucket, and all of a sudden he sees, sure enough, when a crab is right at the rim, right about to get out, another crab will come and pull him right back down. And this continues. So you can experiment with this. It does work. Crabs will never be able to get out. The other one will get them out. So it's an equivalent of, who do you have in your tribe? Who are those friends, right? Who are those people around you? Are they those types of crabs that right when you are gaining and you are like really exceeding, you're doing well, do you have the kind of people around you that are going to grab you by the ankle and put you back down, whether it's words or, insults or fear, doubt, or do you have the kind that will go, hey, let me lift you and let me help you over? And that's what you have to look at the people around you for sure. And look, if it's family members, limit your time with them. It's okay to put boundaries. Got to put boundaries.
Wow, I had not heard that story, but I love that analogy. Wow.
Yeah.
You speak a lot about having overcome adversity and how that's shaped you. What is your piece of advice for people who, we're all going through some sort of adversity at some point in our lives? What would you tell somebody in terms of, helping them bounce back and taking whatever the adversity is and kind of putting it into something positive to move forward, which is kind of tough to think about and do in the moment?
Oh, when you're in it, I'd say, first of all, give yourself permission to have a good cry. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having this pity party for a little bit, right? But just don't stay at the party is what I always say. Don't stay at the party too long. There's a reason there's only amount of hours usually in a party. And even if it's a pity party, yeah, definitely don't stay there too long. So get it out and then be like, okay, there's a lesson to be learned here, right? There's always a lesson. Even if somebody is doing something to you, there's going to be a lesson. And sometimes the lesson is even, why did I get with this person? Why did I even go into business with this person? I knew it. I had red flags at the beginning and I still went there, right? So there's certain things that we can own. Again, let's look at our side of the lane, right? And then I would say, do you breathe it out? This is why I'm very, very big on, when we talk about self-care, giving yourself, every morning I meditate. My mornings are magical. They really are. I give myself the meditation. Sometimes it's me just meditating on my own with just amazing music, or sometimes it's listening to a guided meditation, which you can get many of them for free on YouTube. I mean, tons and tons. And sometimes there's a meditation, whether it's a spiritual, like, speaking a lot about God, or there's some that are more motivational. So it just depends. Sometimes I'll do a mix of two. And then again, really diving into, all right, I'm going to be open to the lesson here. So we're all going to have adversities, but when we are open to the lesson, and when we're open to guide me to the next step, what can I do from there? What can I do in this moment? Sometimes don't even focus so much on what can I do a week from now or a month from now. No, what can I do today? Is there one step that I can get through to get to, out of this, or whatever it is that you're trying to get through? And I recently went through a divorce. It was 3 years ago. I can't believe it's almost been 3 years now, but I was devastated. It hurt so bad because I didn't see it coming, and I didn't. And then I look and I go, well, maybe I did. I mean, there were certain things that I had, again, red flags, right? I got to take my ownership of what I didn't want to see. But then I'm like, what can I do? And for me, it was surrounding myself with very loving people, allowing people to pour into me. I think a lot of times we're wanting to be too strong, too fast. And so I allowed people to pour into me, and listen to all these, empowering things. Went to church. That was really helpful. I'm reading the Bible now again, and it's just, again, it seeps into me. And that's the thing. We get bombarded with so much negativity in our world that we have to be responsible to bombard ourselves with positivity, with messages, with Bible verses, with church, or with friends, or we have to do that. So that's the way, and then use that adversity to teach someone else moving forward. And I think the biggest thing is service. That's the biggest thing. Even while I was doing this, I'm like, I'd go serve at church. I'd go serve in my community. When you serve, it takes you out of yourself and out of your problems, and then you can pour into somebody else that's in need. That's the biggest one.
I love that. Yeah, you do. When you're selfless with your time and giving back, you see things differently. And the
Absolutely.
gratitude that's shown to you from those people or the organizations is really beautiful. You mentioned heartbreak, which is obviously a type of adversity. I feel like with adversity, specifically heartbreak, a lot of times there's this sense of like failure that we put on ourselves.
Mhm.
Why do we do that? And how do we get out of that like failure mindset? Is it because we didn't meet the expectations society put on us about XYZ situation? I just find, the more I talk to people who have been divorced or have spent, lost something, there's this just sense of failure.
Absolutely. Because when you go to do your vows, you never do your vows thinking that it's, not going to work. It's the same thing as when you go into business. In a way, marriage is like going into a business with somebody else, right? And so when you go into business and the business doesn't work, you see it as a failure. My business failed. We say that my business failed. We use those words, right? Now I'm always like, even with that, I've changed the mindset. No, guess what? The business ran its course. It didn't work past this course, but I learned a lot from it. So those lessons that I took from that, I'm going to put them into my next business. Okay, so it's the same thing with marriage. We go into marriage thinking and hoping it's going to work, but when it doesn't, we see it as a failure because we're programmed. It's all programmed. We see it as a failure, but if we can turn around and go, okay, it didn't work. The failure a lot of times is staying in it, especially if it's toxic. I always say, I remember even going to my priest and saying to him, I know there's no way God could have wanted me. Like, this cannot be what he calls a marriage. It's like, he's like, no, it's not. right? So it's almost like it gives you this permission to let go. And so for me, it was actually a win in that I'm saving myself is the way that I saw it. I learned from that. I'm taking the lessons from that, you know, and that all those lessons, I'm going to put it in moving forward. So I don't think it's ever a failure. I think that we should really take, and some people say, you know, there's success and failure, or they say failing is actually good, because again, it's the perception, right? It's saying the exact same thing I'm saying. I just don't like to call it failure. I like to call it, like, even if a business is not doing well, it gets to a point you gotta save yourself. And if your mindset, if you're getting, if it's weighing so heavy that you're mentally heavy, right? It's really deteriorating your mental health. That's not a win. That is not something that you should definitely be holding on to. Let it go, learn from it, and then go forward.
There's a lot going on in the world right now, speaking of just how we view things and see things. And it's so easy to get caught up in all the negatives. How do you stay optimistic about the future? And what do you choose to focus on?
Well, that's why I definitely empower myself every single day with motivational videos, with meditating, you know, with good people around me. I really, really am selective. I do not watch the news. Okay, every now and then I will tap in, and then sure enough, every time I'm tapping in, I'm like, why? Especially now, I'm going to tell them. I don't know when this is going to air, but if this airs before the election, I'm going to tell people, if you already know who you're going to vote for, stay away. Just stay away. Okay. Because if you think about it, it's in the best interest of all these media outlets to make this into like a boxing match, right? To make the polls even look like they're equal. Like, it keeps people invested, like it is a boxing match or something. And so their ratings continue to stay up, go up. It's a game, right? So I'm always like, look, I know all the facts that I need to know. I know who I'm going to vote for, and that's it. I'm done. But you're not going to steal my joy in this game of that you're playing just so that your ratings can stay up. I'm going to allow it. So you have to be a good steward of your mental health. Just like you have to be a good steward of your money and know and where to invest. And when you don't make good choices with your money, how chaotic, going into debt, all of that, you can't pay your bills. And guess what? You didn't handle it well, right? Good steward of your money. You've got to be a good steward of your mental health, where you definitely put all your emphasis on and your focus on. And so I think that's the biggest thing that we could do right now. And if somebody has a different opinion than you, my gosh, can I just say, like, what's wrong with that? Could you imagine if everybody had to eat, let's say, pizza, everyone, for the rest of your life? We can only do one thing. How beautiful to have pizza and hamburgers and ribs and, you know, whatever it is that you want to have, and Indian food and, you know, Chinese food and Japanese food. How awesome that we get to have all of this variety. It's the same thing with opinions. Like, in the same thing with the way people think. I mean, as long as they're not imposing on you, right? And forcing, like, if I didn't like Chinese food and somebody's forcing it on me, that's different. But just to hear somebody's opinion, okay, you can just be like, okay, that's the way you think. This is the way I think. Done.
Right. And as a society, I think the way that we're being, bred and programmed, it's like it's easier and more comfortable to be around the people with the same opinions. So then we're almost siloed even more because it's just more comfortable. And so I agree with you. It's okay to have different opinions. It's just how you express it and being respectful and having conversation that's, moving things along rather than being combative. So that's really something we focus on the podcast too. It's like, let's have the conversations that affect humanity, but let's do it in a respectful way. So this has been so wonderful. You are so authentic and vulnerable and all the amazing things. And I know you've kind of answered this last question that is the premise of this new season, which is how do we stay kind to ourselves? I know you talked about meditation. You talked about surrounding yourself with the right tribe.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you do to make sure that you're kind to yourself, especially on days where it's just tough?
I really focus on what's my purpose here, right? And then align my work with my purpose. I think it's very important. We're really here for a blip. I think it's important to wake up every day excited as to what you're going to put out there, right? We put out energy, we put out our mind, our smart, our like just our intellect, all of that. So what is it that we're going to choose to put out there? And so I've made a conscious choice of this brings me a lot of joy. And because this brings me a lot of joy, like to be speaking, to be singing, all of these things in turn, it's bringing joy to others. And so that for me, I could look at myself at the end of the day in the mirror and just be like, you done good, Lil. And wake up the next day like, all right, let's do it again, you know? But I think the other thing too, when I was saying about service, for example, I have it on my vision board. I've had it for a while. I've had that I wanted to do a missions trip for like overseas, like, different country. And I can't even tell you how excited I am to do this. Like I said, it's been in the middle of my vision board. And it's a blonde girl and she's going like this and she's got all the kids around her. And yeah, I'm so excited. I've been to Egypt, but I went with WWE. I was only there for 2 days and it was just a different atmosphere, right? To actually be going there and be embedded in the community for 9 days and be able to see how they live. And they always say that when you go to serve, the ones that get serves is you, because you come back with such a different perspective. And I just can't wait. I can't wait to be there for them. And I can't wait to see what kind of perspective am I going to come back with. And that is a part of self-care and self-love, is giving yourself those opportunities and being open to what else is out there and what haven't I learned yet, and get excited about learning something new every day.
We truly don't realize how much we get when we give until we give. And
Totally.
it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
You have brought so much joy to me today by being on this show. I think the humanity community is going to learn just so much from your just experiences and everything you've shared. And I think I told you this before we got on today. This is such a full circle moment. I think you meet people in a part of your life and you don't know how you're going to connect later. And how cool to have you on, 8 or 9 years after we've met out in California. It means so, so much. Thank you.
Same to me. I mean, really, like when you reached out and you're like, would you be on? I'm like, whoop, I absolutely kidding. This is awesome.
Means
Good
a
chat.
lot.
I haven't talked to you in so long. Now we got to stay connected for sure.
Absolutely. We will.